Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session, Activating Learning Equity Across Higher Education with Kevin Kelly. Thank you for taking time out and being here today. My name is Lori Burris, and I am the Education Innovation Advisor at LinkedIn Learning, a super cool job title. LinkedIn Learning is the leading provider of learning online videos and was formerly known as lynda.com when it was purchased by LinkedIn in 2015. I have been consulting for LinkedIn Learning, aka Lynda, since 2009 and working with higher education initiatives and strategies for integrating LinkedIn Learning across the campus. In addition, I teach at several colleges, USC Graduate Design Program, Art Center, and Otis, as well as having taught 22 years at the Pasadena City College as head of the Digital Media Center. This is the first in a series of monthly virtual live webinars that we will be doing for higher education leaders to focus on the issues, the strategies, and the problems that they need to solve. I'll be talking more about that, but I just wanted to let you know that the next month we'll be having Linda Wyman, and I'll be doing an interview with her, a rare occasion. Feel free to sign up. I'll be putting up the sign up for it afterwards. And in March, we'll be talking about broadband access with Paul Signorelli and a band of people from ASU, Arizona State University, who are deeply, deeply interested in creating a movement of educators to be not just dreamers, but activists and really push for broadband access in higher ed from K to grave. We're lucky today to have Kevin Kelly with us. I actually met Kevin face-to-face at one of our mini LinkedIn Learning events, but I've always been aware of his work long before I met him. He was really a name that we all heard about at the California State University system. If you worked in California in public education and higher ed, you knew about Kevin Kelly. He teaches online courses as a lecturer at the Department of Equity, Leadership Studies, and Instructional Technologies at San Francisco State University. He works with colleges and universities as a consultant to address distance education, educational technology, and organizational challenges. Kevin also publishes online courses for the Education Channel at LinkedIn Learning. So you can follow and connect with Kevin on Twitter, and you can also follow and connect with him on LinkedIn. We're delighted to have him here today, and I want to give him congratulations on his new book that he just launched. He co-authored it with Todd, I'm going to say it wrong, Todd you'll have to help me, Kevin. Todd
Zakryzek.
The title of the book is Advancing Online Teaching, Creating Equity-Based Digital Learning Environments, which, by the way, I did read over the holiday break. He also writes and creates podcasts. If you haven't heard about Phil on Ed, he posts there all the time on the LinkedIn feed. I follow him. He's one of my favorite places to go. And what I love about Kevin's podcast and writing is he always uses data to back it up, as well as the anecdotal experience that he has had as an instructor in the classroom. So, Kevin, let's get going. And I'm going to start with my first question for you. And welcome. So glad to have you here today. And I really appreciate you taking the time out to do this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here. And it's nice to speak with all of you today.
So I'm going to start off with a really basic question. How would you describe yourself as a learner? How do you best learn?
Well, I would say three different aspects of the learning process. One, I call myself a lifelong learner. I'm in it for good. When you say K to grave, that's my learning experience. I also would say I'm an active learner, or maybe even tenacious. If I want to know something, I figure out different ways to gain that skill or knowledge. And as an instructor myself, I also call myself an intentional novice learner. To put myself in my students' shoes, every year or two, I try to recapture a beginner's mind as a learner, because now that I've become an expert in certain things, I want to remember what it's like to be a beginner. And so I'll learn something new, like sign language or surfing or beekeeping. This past summer, 2020, I took a blues guitar finger picking class over Zoom to see what it was like to do something experiential, but over distance. And so those are three ways that I would describe myself as a learner.
I guess you and I are pretty similar because I took, believe it or not, a paper engineering pop-up book from a woman who lived in Madrid, and the class was all in Spanish, and I did it through subtitles, as well as I took the course, the very popular course on Coursera called The Art of Happiness. And then my own LinkedIn Learning was to watch every course we had on equity and inclusion this summer. So I have a similar thing. I feel like if I'm not learning something new, I'm not going to have new opportunities. You have a really interesting course at San Francisco State University that's been running for a while. It's called How to Learn with Your Mobile Device. And I wish I had a slide to show you how that's spelled, because it's spelled out like you would do it in text, not the complete written out. And could you talk a little bit about that course and how you created that and how you developed it and how it gave you some of the ideas of what you needed to be doing?
You bet. Well, How to Learn with Your Mobile Device is an undergraduate general education course in which students learn strategies to improve their learning and then learn how to use technology in their pockets to execute those strategies. It came about because the department chair at the time said, hey, we need an undergraduate course for our graduate program to help get students thinking about instructional technologies and different strategies that they might use before they finish their undergraduate work so that they might join the graduate program. And so it's been a fully online class for over 10 years. And every semester I make changes, whether it be adding universal design for learning practices or gamification, or lately, because of the work I've been doing, putting in equity focused strategies to make sure that every student's successful.
One of the things I was really interested in this course is you have the students identify a role in the class. It's the learning warrior, the learning sage, and the learning guide. And give us some of your thunk behind what that means and why you do that.
Well, again, the gamification is meant to increase the learner's motivation. And so the different aspects of gamification include having a personal investment. And so if students can not only choose a role that aligns with their goals for the course, a learning warrior is someone who wants to take a deeper dive and apply the concepts to the course to their own life. A learning sage is someone who wants to become maybe well-versed, but at a more shallow level and get to know a little bit about everything. And then a learning guide is someone who really likes to learn in collaboration with others. And so they might be helping fellow students who might not be as experienced with technology or learning, or they might just be someone who wants to work in small groups more often than working on their own.
Is this self-identification helpful to the student? Does it make them feel more confident in classes when they can identify what their role is?
I do ask them questions at the end of each term about how they feel, if they've stuck with the role that they chose for themselves at the beginning, or if they end up changing over time because the conditions are different. And most students say that they stick with the role that they originally picked. They love the chance to find more meaning in the class than it's a requirement for general education. I get a lot of, I was taking this for the units and I walked away with skills that I'll use the rest of my life, which I always think is the best feedback I ever get for the class.
So I'm going to ask this question to everyone who's on today, but I'm going to make Kevin answer it live. You guys can put your answers in the chat. Think of the best teacher you ever had. Why was that person you selected your favorite teacher? What do you think that person found most challenging about teaching? So if you could put down that one quality that made that person or that technique or that strategy, that would be great if we could see that in chat. And Kevin, who was your favorite teacher?
Well, when I think of the many teachers I've had over my life, the best ones have made learning fun or engaging while challenging me on a personal level. And a couple great examples: in high school, my Spanish level 3 teacher said, hey, you're doing really well in this class. I would like you to teach English to the janitorial staff. And so at lunch, instead of just eating with my friends, I would meet with Ruben and Alma and others and just ask them questions. What are the tasks you need to perform today? And then we'd construct vocabulary and practice asking the questions they would need at the grocery store or wherever they needed to use English that day. And so it probably is one of the reasons I became an educator. But I really liked the aspect that she asked me to go beyond the course and start finding real world applications for, in that case, speaking Spanish. But that's what I really loved about all the instructors that I found to be the best.
Well, that's what we're seeing in the chat, that the teacher recognized some special quality and then pushed that special quality, made everybody have a stretch. It's made them see the potential that they had, which is super, super cool. I had a similar experience. I never thought I was going to be a creative person. I thought I was just going to be like writing and taking math. And I had an art teacher who said, do you want to come in during lunch hours and on your breaks? And that's what I did. I never joined a volleyball team. I became the girl who was always in the art room.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't think I would have had the confidence to go to art school and study it if I hadn't had that experience of someone just saying, do you want to do more? What are the greatest challenges in effectively preparing faculty to support the differences and the diversity that the open door brings in access-oriented institutions like public community colleges and universities? I mean, essentially what I'm saying is that if you teach at a community college or a state-run university, you're letting everybody in, and you don't necessarily have the big endowment that Harvard has, but you're putting out large number of graduates who will really do affect the local and state economies. And one of the things is, there's been a push to get the degrees out without talking about the complexity of this diverse population.
Well, I would say
So
the biggest challenges include gaining awareness and practicing empathy. So often because of that diversity and the differences that open door brings, we often don't know as much about our students' lives as we could. And so a great example is I was running a workshop at a community college in Southern California, and a physics instructor shared how she used scuba diving as an example of changes in pressure. And then she saw blank stares in the classroom and realized that, and asked the students, have any of you ever been scuba diving before? And when none of them raised their hands, she went and found different examples, asking them, well, what are some changes in elevation? Have any of you been snowboarding, or have any of you been in an airplane? Or so then she was able to think outside her own lived experience to include more examples that would appeal to people who've had different lived experiences.
I think that's a really important thing. I mean, I've been teaching for over 3 decades, and in one of the equity classes that I took this summer, the teacher said 50% of all the content you need walks in the door with your students. You should be thinking of what you're creating is a framework or a jungle gym for those things to all have a place, all those stories, all those experiences have a place to live inside that classroom. I thought that was such a great analogy that I had been thinking, I'm the mama bird who has to feed all the babies, but I hadn't been thinking of them as being really half of all the resources I needed to be a really effective teacher, to have a really effective learning community. So I'm going to go back to your book because I'm really hot on it, having just finished reading it. In your new book, you really have kind of a nice way of reflecting on 3 big ideas. And I want you to talk a little bit about each of them because they're super, super important. And secondly, I read a lot of stuff and go to everything on education all the time. I mean, I'm a junkie. They're not always put all 3 together. The first one is universal design, and you may need to explain what that is. The second one is fostering human connectedness, a kind of a movement around humanism and empathy. And then the third one is learning equity. If you could just take a moment to explain each one of those and then how they work together.
Sure. Well, we definitely wanted to have these 3. And if you think of a Venn diagram with 3 circles that overlap in the middle, that's kind of how I picture it. Universal design for learning is simply providing multiple pathways for learners to reach a particular goal. And it's a prescribed set of pathways based on some research done by CAST, CAST.org. Human connectedness is just remembering that there's a human on the other end of the internet cables, and that rather than creating experiences that may fall flat, getting students to stay connected with us as instructors as well as their fellow students. If you've read any of the surveys that have gone out in the last year for COVID and student experience, there's a lot of attention on the fact that students feel disconnected from their classmates and the other instructors. And so trying to build experiences that allow students to regain that sense of connection. And then the last, learning equity, is really all about removing barriers. What's in students' way for them to succeed? And so some of those barriers may be things that we put in front of them, the institution puts in front of them, or life puts in front of them. So we just do our best to kind of level that playing field.
So that said, I'm going to ask the next question. You've given me the concepts. How can we as faculty members and or administrators create learning environments that are fair, equitable, and inviting for students? You know, what are your top 3 strategies here?
Well, one, we can actively question the learning environment. Again, putting ourselves in our students' shoes. One of the things I encourage faculty to do is complete some of their own assignments using their smartphone, because some of their students may not have access to a computer. They might be sharing a computer with working adults and other students in the house. They may not have access to the internet. We know some students are driving to parking lots by McDonald's and Starbucks and using the internet access from their car. So really putting ourselves in our students' shoes, asking ourselves what might be a barrier for students. And then most importantly, probably, is talk to the students. We talk about students a lot, but we don't often talk to our students. Ask them for feedback about what works, what they would change, and ask for that feedback on a regular basis rather than just at the end of the quarter or semester.
Yeah, one of the things that you hit home for me that really connected with me is that you had talked about how a lot of teachers say, I teach how my best teacher taught me, or and then along a couple decades later came, I teach the way I learned the best, which still only serves really one person, you, the teacher. But I really had to do a kind of a self-check on this. How could I increase equity? And maybe you could address, there's this unconscious bias. Am I representing images and topics with bias? And am I increasing inclusive course environments and activities? And how could I increase my personal connection all online? And some of these are pretty daunting. I mean, Zoom sort of opens and closes. There's no hallway conversations. There's no saying, let's take a walk on break. Um, uh, you, a lot of Zoom, everyone's watching everything that everybody's doing. And when you send them out to breakout rooms, yeah, they all love breakout rooms, but you're also not able to eavesdrop on every single breakout room. So this is a really tough one to sense your class, that multisensory kind of understanding of them.
So you brought up a number of different concepts, and again, some of it's awareness. We bring bias to the table wherever we are, whether it be a course experience or just walking through the park. And so, and there's great literature about this. Jennifer, I think it's Jennifer Eberhardt from Stanford, wrote a great book about it, and she talks about the fact that everybody has bias. It's nothing to feel bad about, but it's something that we need to manage. And so whether it be unconscious bias or image and representation bias or cultural bias, those are different aspects that we can manage by making sure that the media that we present to students in our class includes and represents them. So do we have, there's an example from anatomy textbooks that a certain number of them have mostly male body parts in the anatomy textbooks, unless you get to the reproductive system chapter. And most of them have pale skin subjects, as opposed to people from all parts of life. And so the biases can then be conversation points where we ask students, how can we address this together, or using open educational resources, or just supplementary resources, or a different set of official resources or required textbook type things, we can make sure that we're presenting information that includes our students and recognizes the differences in life. So that's just one example of many.
And I'm going to share one personal example that I had a learning lesson for me in this book is that Kevin, you mentioned that a lot of students are in the course for different goals. You are teaching the course for educational goals that the university or the institution has set up for the program or the reputation of that school or what they best produce. But the student may have personal goals. And so one of the things that I tried after reading this is, just started teaching this week, is before I showed them the syllabus, I made everybody write in chat one thing they would be disappointed if they didn't get to learn it this in the next 15 weeks. And I wanted to see if it matched any of the things that I was going to be teaching them in the syllabus. And it was really, really interesting to see what really mattered to them the most that they wanted to get done in the next 15 weeks. Now, I'm not going to go through my personal course, but I found that then when I showed them the syllabus, we kind of talked about that. And I said, now that I know what you want and now you know what I want, let's put a percentage next to each one of these things that's in the syllabus. And we kind of co-created it on the spot with this percentage system. And that's a really great brainstorming technique, is throw out a lot of ideas, but then put them into some sort of hierarchy that have attached importance to everyone that's made that list. And I found that by doing that, I immediately got feedback. You were so engaging. You were so, I didn't think I could stay awake for 7 a.m. course. It was interesting. Just that, I mean, like I'm no superhuman person. I'm just putting that out. So I'm just, again, touting the ideas to take this moment to reflect even on small issues that maybe just changing one behavior could change things for the whole tone and temperament of a class. You have used a term in the book that I had never heard of, and I want to go over it. It's called equifinality, EQUI finality. What does that mean, and where does it come from? And tell me a little bit how you practice that.
Well, equifinality is simply letting people choose different paths to achieve the same goal. It comes from systems thinking, I think, and there are a number of fields that use the term, including biology and computer science and others. But I just reapplied it to teaching because it strikes me as a great way to describe universal design for learning and also the design for learning equity, and different ways of looking at providing those multiple pathways for our students and helping them make the right choices for themselves. So knowing that some students may have difficulties with high bandwidth videos or something like that, making sure that we give them an audio with something that they can read so that they have lightweight things that take less time to download and they don't need to be online to consume. There's a great example from Kansas State University. Michael Wesch is an instructor there, and he'll actually record himself reading some of the articles for his classes. So it's almost like a book on tape so that students who are commuting in a pre-pandemic world, they can listen to it instead of reading it. And that's, a matter of just meeting students where they are. So probably more words than you needed.
No, I think it's absolutely important. I think it's something we want to address. I really want to ask this question. I think it's all something we really care about. It really came up through the Black Lives Matter movement this summer. I know that we have all kinds of diversity, but let's talk about and let's consider how can we support African American students and or Latino, Latina, Latinx students so that they're equally successful.
Well,
how do we go at that? It's a big issue.
It is, and the research shows that those two demographics often face those equity-based challenges in online courses, along with first-generation students who may have different levels of preparation for our online courses, starting to use the term education debt instead of achievement gap because it recognizes that the institution plays a role. And I really love the framing, rather than making our students college ready, are we making our colleges student ready? And so there's some great thought leaders out there. Dr. J. Luke Wood from San Diego State University created a free online course and a book called Black Minds Matter, which is full of great ideas. Zaretta Hammond wrote a book called Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. And then for Latinx students, in an essay published by the American Council on Education, an instructor, Francis Contreras, suggested implementing culturally relevant approaches that engage Latinx students and their families, because it's such an important part of culture. And she also calls on institutions to foster greater connections to Latinx communities and regional organizations. So us as individual instructors, we can start finding ways to imbue that meaning for our students. A great example from Laney College here in California is an instructor who asks her students not just to watch a video for her class by themselves, but to watch it in their community, either with their family, with their friends, or with some community group that they belong to, and then lead a discussion about what that video means for that group of people, so that rather than just watching a video and writing an essay about it, they're finding the personal meaning for themselves and those people close to them. And that has shown to be a really powerful way to support the communities that you brought up in this question, but also others as well.
Well, all of these things are so important, and they're so important to us at LinkedIn Learning. We talk about all of these things a lot. We talk about those ideas of choice, that there's different paths, different ways people need to access, forward, backward, frontwards, sideways. But one of our new features, if people don't know about it, and I'm just going to do a small plug for it, is we have got watch parties. So teacher can pick a video or a course and pick a time and a date, and everybody can go on and watch it together, and they can comment just like we're doing right here in Zoom as they're watching it together, so that we're not doing, one of the things I hear teachers are not as comfortable doing asynchronous because they don't understand what some of the choices are, but watch parties has been pretty successful. It gives people a sense of community. It makes them feel like they're not as isolated, and they can be talking to their peers. And while you're watching the video, you can be asking the teacher questions or other people in the classroom questions about how you feel in a very candid way, without interrupting or disrespecting the instructor in the video. So just putting that out there. This isn't, LinkedIn Learning is not the only one doing that, but it's a pretty popular idea now to how to use our asynchronous video experiences. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, because now at this point I want to take some time to talk about some of the really cool projects that Kevin is working on right now. So one of the ones that got me thinking about you, Kevin, was, and I have now used this and shared this with hundreds of faculty members, is this HyFlex course design. You give an example of a 50-minute class, and I literally in the fall downloaded the script and followed it word for word, letter for letter, because I realized that I'm a great face-to-face classroom teacher and an adequate online teacher, but kind of doing both at the same time for me was like a pat the head, rub your tummy moment. And it's a little bit like putting on a Broadway show and teaching at the same time and trying to be really kind and really empathetic. So I love the fact that you kind of gave us a strategy on how to break up a 50-minute course, which I would guess 80% of all courses in universities are around 50 minutes long. And we've done some studies at LinkedIn Learning that if you really want people's attention, 45 to 50 minutes is about it for screen. It's very different for face-to-face. We can sit for hours for face-to-face, but for screen teaching, 45 to 50 minutes is sort of this magic number. So I thought maybe you could go through it. I've put example of the 50-minute one up here and talk a little bit how that works.
Sure, and we have
what HyFlex design is too.
Yeah, and there's a tiny.cc link that goes to the Google Doc that you're talking about. But for those who aren't familiar with what's called hybrid flexible or HyFlex course design, it was invented by my colleague at San Francisco State, Dr. Brian Beatty, and it's really meant to increase learner choice. So students choose how they want to participate in each class meeting. They can choose to go in person They can choose to join the class live via video conference, or if circumstances prevent them from being available at a specific time and day, then they can watch it asynchronously on demand using recordings and online activities. And so last year, I wrote a blog post breaking down the main ideas about HyFlex course design because I knew that it was a way that campuses could reach greater instructional continuity when we have campuses closing for things like wildfires out here in California, hurricanes in the Southeast, and then everybody when the pandemic hit. And I created these scripts like the one you're showing on the screen after seeing questions on some listservs, because whether it's HyFlex strategies or learning equity strategies, teachers always want to know, what does it actually look like? And so taking these ideas and making them more concrete and saying, this is an example of what a class session might look like. Here's how you mentioned it's like patting your head and rubbing your tummy. There's a cognitive load for instructors to keep track of 3 different groups of students. And so that's why I always say it's like creating a run of show where you're building in touch points for yourself to remember that, hey, I've got students who are online right now. I've got students who are watching the recording. So let me acknowledge them. Tomorrow, I'm going to record a workshop for a group. It's going to be 100% asynchronous. And so I'm going to build in pause points and actually say to the camera, now press pause, go do this activity on the worksheet. And when you come back, I'll share what I did and you'll be able to compare the two. And so the hybrid flexible course design it's more work, but it definitely provides that flexibility for students, especially whether there's a pandemic or not. We know that they need it.
And just to help you, even if you're just doing baby steps of this, for me, the idea, okay, I'm going to do something for 10 or 12 minutes, then switch it back to them where they bring them back in, and then I do something for 10 or 12 minutes and bring them back in, and then I do something for 10 or 12 minutes and bring them back in. And there's such a variety of activities. It got me thinking, and then I started trying some of my own and being more experimental. But it helped me with the feeling of timing and pacing, which I would normally just understand by looking at body language in a face-to-face class, which you can't get from little tiny little headshots of everybody in a Zoom environment. The other work that you're doing right now is with Peralta College. You can tell everybody a little bit about the school and what it's like in that Oakland community, but I really wanted you to talk about this incredible rubric, which is basically an equity learning rubric. How to use learning equity in all of your course design and all of your academic and program design.
Well, the origin of this rubric was that I had helped this community college district in Oakland, develop a distance education plan, the first one that they'd ever created. And they decided that they wanted to have 2 values be at the heart of that distance education plan: the students themselves, the learners, and equity. And so once we did that, we decided, well, we can't just make this a document that sits on a shelf. How do we operationalize that? How do we make it possible for instructors to become more aware of increasing equity in their courses? And so we went out across the interwebs and found that there are no instruments that support instructors just checking their course for these things. And so we decided to build one. And so we created a rubric based on the research, and that research stemmed from either studies that show that there are equity issues that negatively impact student learning, or equity strategies that positively affect student learning. And I guess I can back up just a little bit. I really like how the district has decided to operationally define equity in the first place. And maybe this would be an interesting exercise for our participants as well.
Yeah, let's do
In,
that. Let's
in
do that
the
now.
in the chat, maybe everybody can put 1 to 3 words that they associate when they hear the term equity. And then I'll tell you what the Peralta team has come up with. That'll be the cliffhanger. Let's see, fairness, equal access, empathy, balanced, access to resources, opportunity, Everybody gets a piece of the pie, says Keisha. Everyone gets what they need. Same level, justice. So these are a lot of terms that we often associate with equity. And the way that the Peralta team has framed it is, the dictionary says freedom from bias. That's the simplest definition for equity, but they've expanded it to be freedom from assumptions, biases, and institutional barriers that negatively impact students' motivation, opportunities, or accomplishments. And so that, to me, really gets at the heart of, again, that concept of education debt instead of achievement gap or equity gap. And makes us more aware of how we can support the students. And so this rubric, based on that research, looks at different aspects. We saw the word access. So do students have access to the technology that you're requiring them to use for their course, whether it be Zoom like we're using now, whether it be internet with the appropriate level of bandwidth. Some students don't turn their cameras on because they don't have very good bandwidth at home, and they're trying to make sure that they don't get disconnected because the connection's poor. Another aspect of equity is making sure that we're addressing different types of bias, that image and representation. There's research that shows that students from different demographics, if they don't see themselves in the materials of the course, they're less motivated to study them. We see it even in today's world, where a lot of young girls are really empowered to seek leadership positions because they see an African-American female, Kamala Harris, in the #2 position soon next week. And there's a great image gallery on Getty called Lean In, and I think it says, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So just thinking about these different aspects of equity, this rubric gives people concrete ways to think about their course experience and check it for things like connection and belonging, for how meaningful is my content, and more.
I think it's super important. I printed it out. It's attached right by my desk right now. And I use these words now a lot in my class, just to make sure that everybody knows we're all in this conversation together. It's not a conversation that I just drive. So there's some other projects that you're working on that are super cool and about ready to launch. One is this project you're doing with Santa Clara University, and I was so intrigued by this one because it's a student-generated, student-initiated, student-led project that solves a problem for Santa Clara.
And this goes back to something you asked, what are some 3 things that we can do to create a more equitable environments? And so Santa Clara University really took it to heart that we need to talk to our students. And so working with them, we went out and found about 24 student leaders in the summer of last year to construct an experience to prepare people to be better online learners. And so it was, again, as you mentioned, by students for students. So we had, I created 3 roles: student architects, who helped me build the course; student voices, where we created 90 plus 2 or 3 minute videos where students were talking to their fellow classmates about the things that had caused them challenges and how they overcame those challenges in a rough time during the pandemic. And then we had student promoters, students who were very keen with social media and marketing strategies, really get the word out. And I think when they relaunched this just over the winter to help students prepare for the next term, we've already had a couple thousand students enter the course. And so it's been exciting to see.
Those are amazing numbers, amazing
Yeah.
numbers. There's another thing going on that you're working with, another concept that I've heard, but I don't think it's always clear. It's funny that the name is transparency, but talking about transparency in teaching and learning, could you talk a little bit what that means, transparency in teaching and learning?
You bet. So this is something that I've adopted rather than working on the TILT project, but it started at University of Nevada, Las Vegas with a woman named Marianne Winklemis and her team. And they've created this transparent assignment template that I went through the process of applying to my course over a summer. And that transparent assignment template is designed to support all students, but especially students like first generation students to go to college, where they may not be as familiar with some of the things that we assume students already know. And so it puts in the instructions for any activity, not only what are we going to do, and not only how are we going to do it, but why are we doing it, providing a rationale. And that simple act of adding that rationale is really increases student retention and success in terms of completing those tasks. And so I went through my whole course, redid all of the instructions for all my activities, and I wasn't quite sure if it worked. And then it turns out that I had a student fail the class in the spring and retake it in the fall. And he noticed the difference because he had been in both versions. And he emailed me at the end of the class and said, I really knew what to do this time around. So it was exciting for me that I had done something and that it had had a positive impact on student learning.
It also reinforces what we know about research for neuroscience and behavioral psychology and learning, that if a student or a learner feels purposeful, their motivation stays very high and they stay very engaged. So giving people the why gives them the purpose. Why am I in? What's the game here that I'm in it for? Really, and it's something I think we as educators kind of know so much internally. It's like, knowing how to ride a bike. You don't think to explain all those little steps to them. It's just going back and kind of breaking that down into more baby steps so that they understand the why. The online equity training template, is that the one that you were talking about?
So the online equity rubric is
rubric, excuse me.
Is the tool that we created for instructors to look at their course. And then, and we're just about to launch a new version of this training, basically that people can download and use on their campuses to learn more about how it works. And we've put it into 3 steps. You learn about the concept like connection and belonging or human bias. Then you analyze existing examples from other people's courses and how they've addressed those equity challenges. And then you go off and build something for your own course. And so we have this nice scaffolded process, and it's in the Canvas Commons that any campus or individual can download and learn more about the underpinnings of the rubric and learn how to apply it in their own class.
Kudos to you. Everything that Kevin does, he tries to make available to teachers for free. And this is a great system that he's working out with Canvas and Structure Canvas to get some of these courses up there. I was super impressed by this. It's really simple and fun and easy to use. Okay, I know you didn't write this, but Michelle Pacansky-Brock, who we have had speak many times at LinkedIn Learning, has really gotten into humanizing. She's not the only one leading this movement. Obviously, in your book, humanizing or personalizing is talked about all the time in the book, but I thought you might talk about what that movement is and what the players are wanting to do here.
Well, and we actually quote Michelle a couple times because she's done so much work in the field, it's hard not to. But the idea of humanizing, as I mentioned before, if you've ever heard of netiquette or internet etiquette protocols or guidelines, usually the very first one is remember the human. And so in that case, it's make sure you're not using all caps or something like that, so you're not yelling at people online. But in my case, it's as teachers, becoming aware of how our students might have had different learning experiences. Not everybody is going to a campus and living on campus and having that traditional ideal or idyllic 4-year experience of kind of going away and becoming a new person and identity development. Some of us are working, some of us are taking care of children or elderly parents, and need to balance school with other aspects of life. And so that humanizing your course is becoming aware of how our students need, empathizing with them, and then taking action to help students basically succeed regardless of what their circumstances are. And I like to say that part of that humanizing a course means that we're intentionally creating more opportunities for students to connect with one another and with us as the instructor as people. So I have a discussion forum in my class called the Community Cafe, where you don't have to talk about the class. And we use Flipgrid, which is a video platform that automatically captions 2 or 3 minute videos, and students can either converse with sharing videos back and forth, or they can use text in the discussion forum. Again, a universal design for learning strategy to give them multiple pathways to communicate.
If anyone wants this deck, you can contact me. I'll give you the deck, but these are the terms we've kind of covered today. I'm about ready to go into the Q&A, but the things that I thought were really some of the most important terms and concepts from the work that Kevin is doing in his research is this learning equity, equifinality, the HyFlex course design, the smart design for student learning outcomes. How do we vet resources that we use in the classroom? How do we decide if they work or don't work? Oh, we haven't talked. 1-minute threads is a really great activity. And just before we go into Q&A, just talk a little bit about the warm demander. How to be empathetic and kind and exceed expectations.
Well, and what's interesting is that it reflects what I found to be my best teacher, is that warm demander who combines personal warmth and basically being a demanding teacher, not letting students do the bare minimum, challenging them to the level that they can reach and maybe a little further, the stretch that you brought up earlier. And so I think, and it comes from research in I think the 70s. And it's a great way to think about how we can work with our students to be both caring and demanding at the same time.
Yeah, I'll put my email in there for you guys in case you want to get this information and get this deck. And last but not least, let's go to Q&A. Let's have about 5 minutes of Q&A. And while we're doing the Q&A, I'm going to put up what the courses are that are currently available by Kevin Kelly in the LinkedIn Learning Library. So do we have any questions, Alma? Or does anyone want to just put questions into the chat? Because we have a small enough group, I think we can handle them if you have questions for Kevin.
No questions at this time in the chat, Lori.
Okay. I have one question that I didn't ask that I think is really important. I found it really difficult last fall to create community in the online course. As you mentioned, when I did an informal poll, students who had known each other face to face were contacting outside of class 1 to 3 people regularly. People who had just started out in that environment for the first time and did not know anyone face to face actually reported having no people other than me that they were contacting outside of that class environment, which was a little bit frightening to me. They didn't have any sense of the person to the left or the right of them. They hadn't said, let's have a Zoom coffee or let's have a Zoom chat or a study group or any of those things. So that was really disconcerting to me. That the students who had the best sense of community was all based on their face-to-face experience prior to going into the all online environment.
Well, I would say one way to achieve that, what I do in my class is I have a Google form called Find a Study Buddy. And basically they put in the days of the week and the times of day that work best for them. And, Monday morning, Monday afternoon, and so on. So that they can find people who will be available for something live. There's a great strategy from the Peralta Community College District. One of the instructors there has a sheet called Ask 3 Before You Ask Me. And then that means that students have to find 3 other students and get some contact information, like a phone number where you can text someone quickly or hit them up on Twitter to identify, hey, what's the assignment? I don't understand these instructions. And then if you ask 3 different people and you still don't understand, then it's a case where you would contact the instructor. But both of those increase the sense of community. I also put students in small groups and keep them in the same small group throughout the semester, because my class is 50 to 100 students. And so it's hard to get to know students in such a large group. But if you put them in groups of, let's say 8 or 10, then they get to know each other a little bit better.
So This is your chance. We're getting ready to close out on this session. We're hitting 50 minutes, and I promised it wouldn't be more than an hour.
Look,
Do we have any more questions, Elma?
yeah, there are actually a few questions.
Okay, let's
One,
do those questions.
Sure. I see one by R. Taylor, thoughts about creating equity in the Zoom class setting. And I know that instructors often face the dreaded wall of empty video screens. You may be the only one who's got their video on. And again, that equity recognizes that students may be in particular situation where they don't want to share their background, what's happening behind them. Their kids may be constantly vying for attention and hopping in front of the camera. They may be sharing a room with a sibling or a roommate and don't want them to be on screen. Some cases, students may have body image challenges and don't want to see themselves on screen because that will make them feel bad. So all those things are understandable, and it makes it harder for us to check in with students and see if they're learning what they need to learn. So using the chat, using other strategies, poll everywhere, or something that asks students to show that they're with you and show where they're not with you. The 1 minute thread that you showed on that slide is an example of having students at the end of each class session share what they understood, what they didn't, and what questions they still have, so that you can address those either in between class sessions or during the beginning of the next one.
I think those are great, really good ideas. Any other questions, Elma?
I see one about avoiding student burnout. And so one thing that we're hearing from students is that they feel like every single instructor has redesigned their course to be student-centered because of all the training we did last summer. And so students are feeling overwhelmed because they're being asked to do more than they typically do in a course where they might be listening to a lecture and then going off and doing homework. Now every class session is more interactive, there's more work to do, and some people, again, are in it to just get by. A student panel last year brought up this in very clear ways, where a 35-year-old returning student who had 2 kids and worked full-time wasn't going to be able to put in the same level of effort as an 18-year-old just starting college and is excited to have this experience. And so recognizing that there may be different levels of participation each week is one thing, and giving students the freedom to have that flexibility and participate asynchronously if they need to, and then checking in with them. One thing that I did that really made a difference is when I checked in with my students, instead of using email subject lines that were very formal, I would just put, "Are you okay?" ? And then the first paragraph would be, "Hey, I know that this is a crazy time of the semester and you may have a lot going on. I just wanted to make sure, I haven't seen you log in for over a week and want to make sure everything's okay, and I'm doing what I can to support you." I used to get maybe 10% response rate to my more formal administrative type emails to students. Once I kind of showed that I cared about them as humans first, and then that I wanted to make sure they succeeded in my class, I started getting maybe 2/3 to 3/4 response rate. So one student even said in the student evaluations this semester that if that really helped them complete their course. If I hadn't taken those extra steps to seek them out personally and make sure they had what they needed, then they might have just given up and stopped. So be aware that it doesn't take a lot of extra time, but it makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Do we have any more, Elma? Or are we pretty close to?
I think we're pretty close. Yeah, no more questions at this time.
Good. I'm going to thank you, Kevin, so much. Thank you so much for doing that. I want to do a big plug for February's event, the Lifelong Learning, an interview with Linda Wyman. And we're going to be talking a lot about how she's learning since she sold lynda.com. And she's a fabulous educator, always learning, just like Kevin is. Kevin, you've shared so much today. What I love about your book and if you I got one more plug for the book, is he gives the big idea, the big umbrella idea, but he also gives really practical steps you can take today. And so my last question for you today is, for any of us out there that are newbies or were, as it pointed out, burning out, if you had to pick one thing that we could do that we could do tomorrow, what would you suggest that we all think about as teachers, as administrators at the university and college level?
I would say pick one thing, because the book is like a buffet. There's so many things in it that you could try. So pick one thing that you want to try and let your students know you're trying something new, and then get feedback from them about how it's going and if it's helping them in the learning process. Because we can get overwhelmed ourselves with all the different ways that we can address equity and accessibility and everything. But putting yourself in your students' shoes is a great way to start.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. He's just endless. I could have talked to him 2 hours. In fact, I sent him a list of questions and I sent him 28 questions. I said, I'm not going to ask you 28, but I had 28 burning questions after I read your book, looked at all the projects that you're working on. As I said, you're so thoughtful and so practical at the same time. You're my favorite kind of person. I call you the pragmatic idealist. I love to be around those kinds of people. If idealists never get things done and pragmatists can make it not that fun, somewhere in between there is always the best thing. I hope I see you all and you share these HED leadership webinars with others. It's #HED leaders.